guys, I just wanted to give you a quick introduction to your lab notebooks. So I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible. How you're going to find it is you will go to your classroom. And I know this says practice class, but yours will say like Trees Biology or whatever. So you're going to find it on your Google Classroom. It'll be one of the announcements that's close to the top of the page, and you'll find the Google Slides picture icon that looks just like this, and it'll say Blank Lab Notebook Trees. So I'm going to go ahead and open that, and hopefully it will say View Only. Do not request edit access. This is my template that everybody's going to make a copy from. So if you request edit access, I am going to delete that request, because what I want you to do instead is make a copy, and you're going to make a copy of the entire presentation. For the name, you're just going to want to put your own name. So Caroline Treese is my name, lab notebook, but you will not save it as Caroline Treese Lab Notebook. You will save it as your own name, Lab Notebook. Make sure that it's also going to be saved in your drive, because you want to be able to find it later. We're going to be using these all year instead of a paper notebook, to make it a little bit easier to access whether you're at home or at school, so that I can grade it either way. All right, so we're going to make a copy of it, and it may take a second because it's a pretty big file. Okay, cool. So at this point, it should have your name at the top, and then it's a lab notebook, and it shouldn't say View Only. You should be able to edit it. So the front page is going to, instead of your name here, you're going to put your own name, so that I know when I open it up and see it whose it is. I'm going to call attention to this real quick. These are any notes that you kind of need to make for me. So if you go back and you redo a lab and you want me to regrade that lab, you might want to say, please regrade Unit 1, Lab 2. And then I know, okay, I've got to go back and look at that. Now, if you have written me a note and then I fixed it, you want to make sure that you delete it later. I just want to show you how this is set up a little bit. So you can see there's tabs down the side. And when you present it, those tabs are going to actually be kind of useful. So you'll have your table of contents, which already has the different units. Notice topic 5 is independent research projects. We'll talk about those later. And then tab 6 is going to be your references or your rubrics. So you'll start your first lab. I'm actually going to have you do, so hang on one second, I'm getting ahead of myself. If you click on the different tabs in present mode, I will actually be able to switch between the different tabs. And if you notice, there's a little home button that'll take you back to the table of contents. Okay, so that's kind of why your lab notebook looks that way and why it's so gosh darn long already. But for your first lab, which is going to be your cube lab or your lunch lab, I'm going to have you do that in the reference or the rubric section. So you'll scroll all the way down to the bottom. Oops, not that far. And it kind of starts on page 23. Okay. Now, in reality, when we start our ecology unit, your first lab will be under the ecology tab right here. But for your first practice lab, we're going to start it in the reference section. And then whenever you do your first ecology lab, you can look back at your cube or your lunch lab. All right, so we're in our reference section. And you'll see the first page is the general lab report rubric. This is how I grade every single one of your labs. Title and date is worth 2 points. You don't have, you can kind of title it whatever you want to, as long as it's appropriate to the lab. But if you just put a title on there, I'm gonna give you 2 points. Materials, 3 points, procedure 5, y'all can read. So here you go. The only thing I want to call attention to is your graphs or your tables. Not every lab is going to require a graph or a table. If the lab procedure page that I've given you, the how to do the lab, if it says, please draw a graph or please do a table, that will be worth 5 points per table or graph. So the more work you do, the more points I'm going to give you. All right, so that's, each lab is going to be worth about 20 points minimum. All right, so keep that page there, and then you can always refer back to it if you're ever thinking, why did I lose points for this? This will kind of give you the answer of why. All right, so here's our the instructions for the lab. Let me zoom in just a little bit. Okay, here we go. Awesome. So if you'll notice, says title goes at the top, and I would like for you to include, this is lab 1 or lab 2, and it will restart for each unit. So for unit 1, you'll have a few different labs, and then for unit 2 you'll start over unit 2, lab 1, lab 2. Anyways, okay, so you'll put your title here, and for the first lab, that'll be your lunch or your cube lab is what you'll type right there. For your materials, you will type anything that you used or touched and that went into you being able to do this lab. Really what a lab report should look like and should be is if anyone were to grab your lab report, they should be able to completely recreate the lab that you did and hopefully get the same results. So you want to include anything that you used to do the lab in this section. This includes This includes your glassware or containers. Like if you used a paper plate to do it, then that would be included in your materials. If you used a Bunsen burner, all of your Bunsen burner supplies would be included in your materials, and that can just be a bullet point. Your procedure is what you did. So for your cube lab, it would be assembled your materials, you observed the cube, you wrote down those observations, and then you made a guess as to what you thought was on the bottom. You do not need to use all of the words that were used on your procedure page. So I'm not expecting you to just copy down those. I'm expecting you to do it in your own words, which means you'll probably simplify it a little bit. So you don't need to type out exactly what was in the procedure page that I gave you. You'll kind of simplify it down a little bit. I want to draw your attention to point 2 right here. And it's really important. It says, assume your reader, the person who's reading your lab report, knows how to set up science equipment. So again, like the example I used earlier, the Bunsen burner, you don't need to tell me how to set up a Bunsen burner. Just say, assemble Bunsen burner, and that's good enough. Okay? So that'll kind of help you with your procedure a little bit. Your data or observations is going to be all of the information that you found while you did your lab. So this could be in a paragraph form, identifying your qualitative data. Remember, qualitative is going to be any data or observations that you found that were not numbers. So a color, a smell, how it looked, anything that's not numbers is going to be qualitative data. Your data or observations may be in a graph or a table that has your quantitative data. Quantitative meaning your number data, so a size of something, if you have data on it, or a calculation that you did, a certain amount of time would be quantitative data. This can really be organized however you want to, unless, again, it specifically says, please include a table or a graph, whatever. As long as it's clear, please don't just say 10, 15, 7, blue, I can't spell blue apparently, and then smell like eggs. Okay, well, what does any of that mean exactly? You'll need to tell me 10 centimeters wide, 15 seconds. So you'll need to actually tell me what all of these things mean, so it has to be very clear how it's organized, okay? Oops, sorry. Here we go. And then your conclusion should be in paragraph form using complete sentences. This is where you explain, how does your data mean anything? How does that explain the topic that we're covering in class? And on your procedure page that I will have given you that helps you complete the lab, it will give you some questions. It'll say, like, how did you draw this conclusion, or what exactly happened here? Sorry, I'm going to make my screen a little brighter. Or what exactly happened here? And you need to answer all of those conclusions, or else you're going to lose points in that conclusion section. Now, I realize this is kind of a small page. This slide is kind of small, so you may need to continue the lab on the next page if needed. And if you do that, then you'll want to say lab 1, and then you'll have your title there, and then say continued, so that I know, okay, we've still got some more stuff on the next page. Okay? So that's pretty much what each lab should look like. And you have that information here in your references. And then whenever you do your cube lab or your lunch lab, you'll include it pretty much like that. Oh, I did skip one thing. Whenever you do a new lab, whenever you start a new lab report, you'll want to duplicate the last slide. And I say that because, so once you duplicate it, so then I'm going to start lab 2, cube lab. Yada, yada, yada. Well, once I have that all there, I will eventually do another lab. So I want a blank page ready for, you know, the next lab that you'll be completing, if that kind of makes sense there. Okay. So that is your lab. Oh, and, oh, sorry. That's the blank one. All right, so this was the one that I made some edit to. I've completed my cube lab, let's say, and I want to turn it in. So since this was for the cube lab, I'm going to go to cube, or again, if you're virtual, that's the lunch lab. And I will, oh, I guess I already submitted it, my bad. Sorry, guys. Many apologies. All right, so I will go to the cube lab or the lunch lab. I will add a file. I'm going to add the lab notebook, and then I'm going to turn it in. Now, this means that because you're using the same document for your labs the whole year, you will turn in your lab notebook multiple times throughout the year. It'll be the same document that you're turning in, but every time you turn it in, it will be to the lab that it specifically says, okay? And it should be a little bit more updated every time you turn it in, if that makes any sense there. All right, guys, so that's how you use your virtual lab notebook.